Aloha, what's up everyone? Welcome to my channel. I'm JayDreamerZ. Thanks for bearing with me if you're watching live. A few technical difficulties, but it looks like everything's all fixed up. So I'll just go ahead and wait for some thumbs up in the chat while I do this little introduction about what we're going to be talking about. Today we're talking about Tunguska. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Tunguska, over 100 years ago in the Siberian, they call it the Tiaga, or the dense forest regions of Siberia, there was an explosion. There was an explosion that ripped across the land, knocking down trees like matchsticks. And it's so interesting when we read those eyewitness accounts. This is all forgotten history already, right? This only happened just over 100 years ago. They don't typically teach about these things. This isn't on the news. I feel like it should be on the news. You know what I mean? Like, this is a humongous event that was just glazed over and forgotten about. Hey, what's up everybody in the live stream chat? It's good to see you all. Thanks for all your support and for hanging in there with me. I appreciate it. So check this out. Why should you watch this particular video? Because I'm going to be sharing with you various eyewitness accounts who go into detail describing what they experienced, what they saw in the sky and what it looked like to them. Because this happened, you know, over 100 years ago. We don't have any video. There's not any pictures or anything. There's a few pictures that were taken much later of the aftermath. And this is really interesting. I feel like you guys are going to love this presentation because I love the topic. So the Tunguska fireball. The other thing is I'm going to share my theory on what the Tunguska event was. I just called it a fireball. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I called it a fireball. So I've got some theories. Feel free to share all of your wonderful theories in the chat or the comment section if you're a future person watching in the future. Now let's jump into the presentation. I'm going to get my screen sharing pulled up so that I can read to you some notes that I have here from a very in-depth book that I was reading about Tunguska and the Tunguska event. All right. Boom. Pulling up the screen sharing right now. There we go. That'll work. All right, cool. So I'm going to do some screen sharing of some notes that I took. I'm actually going to read them to you, but I did want to put them up on the screen so that you could read along if you'd like to. After I read these notes, this is going to take a little while because there's a lot of them, right? After I read this, stay tuned because we're also going to check out ball lightning, and we're going to really go into ball lightning, and I'm going to share some more things about ball lightning with you and some of my theories about that. But let's kick things off by reading some of my notes here about the Tunguska event. This one, we're going to start off. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right one here. Okay, cool. That's the last one. All right, we're going to start off with this one that says it may have appeared both larger and brighter. They're talking about the object. People saw an object in the sky. People described it in various ways, but every person that saw something saw some sort of a light, some kind of a glow. And it says that it may have appeared both larger and brighter than the sun as it blazed from the southeast to the northwest across the sky for 5 to 10 minutes before exploding. That's a long time. That's something that the author of this book, you know, makes a point of time and time again, how long this object was seen in the sky. Now, if you've come across this, this historic event, most people have heard that it was a comet or a meteorite or something, you know, that smashed into the earth. As a matter of fact, it's hard to get real good research on this event because the internet is so watered down with stories of this being created by an impact, by some rock or some heavenly body slamming into the earth. I don't think so. I'm not sure. That's not really where I'm headed with that. But it is a popular opinion. So this light was seen streaking across the sky for 5 to 10 minutes before exploding, right? The bright tail was iridescent, conveying a wide range of colors as reports came down to us. The fact that it was observable at all, descending from the sky for that time, indicates a comparatively low speed. So the author and many other researchers into the Tunguska event are saying it might not be some comet or some meteorite or whatever, because it was up there for way too long. It was going too slow within our own atmosphere before it finally impacted the ground. It goes on to say, trying to map its course, The best we can do is to speculate that it sped from somewhere north of Lake Baikal in eastern central Siberia over a trajectory of some 400 ground miles. So let me explain that in my own language, okay? This thing was seen traveling for 400 miles, and it came from a region, an area called Lake Baikal. We're going to learn a little bit about Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal in Russia is extremely interesting. It's the deepest freshwater lake in the entire world, right? The deepest one. And it's full of intrigue, mystery, anomalies, tales of UFOs, aliens, all kinds of stuff. And it's been happening for quite some time. This article right here says, since the ancient times, the vast Lake Baikal has been known as deeply mysterious. But in the closing years of the Soviet era and since, it has been the location of a number of alleged sightings of aliens and UFOs. It goes on to say, the versions of extraterrestrial activity at Baikal, edged by mountains and containing 1/5 of the world's unfrozen fresh water. This lake has 1/5 of all of our drinking water. Like, if you see this lake on a map, I think I might have a picture of it here in a bit, but if you see it on the map, it's huge. It's gigantic. So this lake relates to supposed aliens being seen by military divers in its depth as large spaceships, in quotes, hovering over its gray, moody expanses. And then it goes on to say, a number of sightings also indicate bright, cigar-shaped objects in the sky flying over Baikal. Remember that, because this is going to come into play when I share with you the rest of these eyewitness testimonies about the Tunguska event, right? I believe that there's definitely a correlation here. I'll tell you this much too. Lake Baikal has had some interesting anomalous activity, especially in the form of these cylinder lights or ball lights, spherical lights that have been seen many places, right? And sometimes just circular lights too. So it goes on to say here that there was a ball that glowed, and then this ball started to fade, and it faded and it started to turn red. It blushed, and it turned into a red ball. And the red ball, it says this red ball for a while lay on the water, and then it began to sink. And all this gradually went under the water, and it became dark. And then it says here, suddenly the scientists were bathed in light from an unusual glow. So there's a couple of different stories about this, but the main one is that they explored down in the depths of Lake Baikal. And the Russian government is no stranger to, there's many rumors and stories about how, oftentimes these sightings and these experiences that people seem to have quite often in this area are kept hush-hush, either by the government or even by locals. Like the Tunguska event, the locals around that area, they were basically told by the government that it was haunted or something like that, and not to talk about it, or bad things are going to happen. You know what I mean? And they scared all the local people who didn't want to give their stories about what they saw that day. But in this story of Lake Baikal, there's these divers that go underwater, and just like many other Lake Baikal stories, they see a light underneath them that rises up. Sometimes they see beings under the water, gigantic beings that seem to have like some sort of a helmet or something like that on. There's pressure differential under the water. There's one account of these divers who saw 3 what looked like alien beings, as well as accompanying lights that came up out of the depths of this lake, freshwater lake, right? And something happened, and all of a sudden they couldn't keep their buoyancy. They couldn't stay where they were, and they were rushed to the top of the water so quickly that 1 or 2 of them died, actually. Like, they got the bends and died. All right, let's continue on with some notes here. It says a low angle of approach and comparatively slow speed are generally accepted for the mysterious space body explored in this book. It was seen over an area equivalent to the land area of France and Germany combined. This indicates more of a horizontal than a vertical trajectory, and it was accompanied by some frightful noises as it flew low enough for acoustic waves to be created. One of the many interpretations among some startled onlookers was that the end of the world was at hand. Like, people, this was such a spectacular event that people thought that this might be it. You know what I mean? And for some, it was it. But really interesting that it talks about how low this light object was traveling. So here's one of my ideas and one of my theories. Maybe this didn't come from the sky. I mean, it seems to be an explosion that happened in the sky, but maybe it didn't come from out in space somewhere. Maybe it came from Earth itself. Let's read on. It says the TCB, that's just shorthand for the phenomenon, may have altered course more than once. And as a remote possibility, there could have been more than one body in flight. So this light, this huge, gigantic, massively bright object, one, it may have changed directions in the sky, right? Which would indicate that it was not a meteor or a comet or anything like that. And two, it may have had more than one part to it. It may have even broken up into other parts, right? All right, let's continue on. It says the damage to the forest below the explosion would have been more elliptical or linear in shape had it borne a higher speed. Analysts unequivocally agree that the phenomenon somehow engulfed itself in a powerful fireball at a height of about 5 miles. So they're guessing, they're estimating that about 5 miles above the ground, this light ball exploded. Boom, knocking down all the trees, snapping all of the trees like matchsticks over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of square miles. It goes on to say a large radial pattern flattened trees like so many matchsticks around a central zone, over 800 square miles in extent. The blast and the heat were intense yet brief and quite unlike a normal woodland fires. The trees were charred and singed, generally far more on the side that was facing the central part of the fall site. They would not burn, they were not burned like they would be in any regular forest fire, basically, right? So the wood that was burned on these trees was burned at a high temperature, but just for a short amount of time. Just a quick blast, boom, right? Just enough to char them for a bit. I mean, it did start a lot of forest fires too. It says here, in 1908, on the morning of the 30th of June, about 7:17 a.m. local time, the greatest natural explosion in recorded history occurred, 5 miles above the remote Siberian wilderness. Now, this is the opinion of the person that wrote this particular thing, but it was regardless a significant event, right? The atmospheric shock waves went around the world twice, and they're using various tools like barometric pressure measurements and stuff like that to record the shock wave, the pulse that this generated worldwide. Goes on to say, a man named Naumenko described a brilliant white elongated mass with a shining ball, irregular in shape and bigger than the moon, that became larger before loudly descending into the forest, right? So there was this huge fireball that looked like it was bigger than the moon. Oh, I got a donation from Ken Albert. Thanks, man. Super appreciate you as always. All right, continue forward. It says here that here's an eyewitness account from the local postmaster. It says that the postmaster saw a fiery streak in the sky during what he took to be an earthquake. Other descriptions included a body that was elongated and narrowing towards one end, and a fiery dart that was torn. Man, that's small to read, right? All right, I might fix that. I don't know. Let me see if I can fix this real quick. This is super tiny. Well, it's easier for me to read on my side. I'm going to read it. It says it was described as a fiery dart that was torn from as bright as the sun. A fiery dart torn from and as bright as the sun. A peasant named, there was a 15-year-old peasant at the time who recalled that in 1930 that he watched an elongated flying object for 3 minutes. So way later on, they interviewed a lot of different people who were there at the time, right? Because it took decades and decades to even go exploring. It took decades to find witnesses. It took a long time for people to really get in there. At least, your average people like us and maybe even the press and stuff too. So this 15-year-old is describing what he saw and they interviewed him in 1930 about the Tunguska event. And he says he watched an elongated flying object for 3 minutes before it disappeared over a hill. A man named Romanoff saw a flattened ball of fire and 2 fiery pillars as it struck the ground. A flattened ball of fire and 2 fiery pillars. That's interesting. And it goes on to say a boatman named Kokorin at the village witnessed a fiery red flame 3 times the size of the sun, followed by great crashes, in his words. Now, keep in mind that these are all eyewitness accounts. Just like, anytime that you ask eyewitnesses what happened, you have, small differences between their stories. However, just like using comparative mythology, you can put those stories together to get a better idea of what actually occurred on that day. And let's see here. Okay, it goes on to say workers at a bell tower in the village, in a nearby village, saw a fiery log flying from southeast to northwest. Another description was of a red flying ball followed by rainbow-like bands, different colors up in the skies, which is really interesting, and that we're going to come back to that too. There was a farmer that was living in the west who saw a large flame leap up from behind the forest to the north and heard sounds like gunfire. He also saw water moving up the river. So whatever this was caused the current in the river to change. That's really interesting to me because I always wondered if you change the electrical current in, a river or in a stream or something, I wonder if you could actually get the river's current of the physical water to follow suit and to also reverse. I wonder if there was something like that going on. Goes on to say, another witness spoke of numerous thunderclaps and a second sun that appeared that hurt his eyes because it was so bright. A wind flew at them, knocking them off of their feet. And he says, now I remember well that there was one more thunderclap, but it was small and somewhere far away. So in addition to this, people heard these booms, right? Many people mistook these booms for artillery or something that was happening like a military. Some people thought there was a war that was happening off in the distance. One witness heard sounds like reverberating peals of thunder receding towards the north. A pane of glass was broken in his house, and due to the heat, he thought that the roof had somehow caught fire. From north of Lake Baikal, it goes on, it seemed to have passed 80 miles west. So there's Lake Baikal being mentioned once again. I'm going to come back to Lake Baikal because I've got some theories about what this might have been. Another witness saw a ball of fire. Once again, this is being described as a ball, right? Sometimes they talk about how it sort of had a tail trailing off of it, but this was a ball, a huge ball that was said to be as big as like the moon or the sun or even bigger possibly. A ball of fire crossing the horizon, a fiery red sphere moving horizontally was reported. We continue on and we read that there had been denials and refusals to share information from the locals, as the writer had observed. Goes on to say the abrupt changes in atmospheric pressure were recorded by the barographs quite clearly. I think that's to measure barometric pressure. Located some 300 miles east of the fall site. So they're recording the pressure changes that were caused by this explosion and by the accompanying thunderous booms that were heard, right? It also says that the water gushing from the earth was clearly the sudden melting of permafrost in the zone by sudden intense heating far swifter than the usual summer thaws. So this is said to have melted some permafrost and maybe even created some new ponds or lakes or things like that. Another guy is quoted as saying on the spot that this was where the thunder and the lightning fell down, that they had fallen down. Another person standing at ground zero, they describe the scene as dead forests enchanted, as if in a fairy tale. Now, when I hear the word enchanted, I think of magic, and when that makes me think of electricity and electromagnetics. That's just me. But this person described being at ground zero as an enchanted dead forest. He also suggested that there was some kind of node or region of rest due to the interference of airwaves at that strange epicenter. Let me translate that. Let me tell you what that means, right? What he's saying is that there was somebody that went to the epicenter, to the exact middle spot where right underneath where this explosion is said to have happened. And there was trees there. There was sparse trees that were still standing up and stuff. All the way around that epicenter, the trees were knocked over. They were all knocked down, right? So it's really interesting. They're talking about how there's this circular shape, and at the epicenter, there's something that's up, which are the trees. There's a little mini forest in the epicenter, but the rest of them from hundreds of miles snapped, knocked over, right? Why? Why is there this little neutral point in the epicenter at the very middle that seemed to have left so many trees untouched, leaving an enchanted forest, if you will, right? Well, I'm going to compare that to craters, or at least alleged craters that we find or that we have access to seeing on Google. On the moon craters, lunar craters, right? Exact same thing or a similar thing can be seen on many of these moon craters. Check out some of these pictures, right? Where you have the circle, and keep in mind, they're not really like craters. I don't know if I would even call that an actual crater. Like, to me, a crater is more of a bowl shape. This is more of a plate that has edges on it. You know what I mean? But check this out, right? I believe, and I have for quite some time, that these craters right here are made through electromagnetic discharge, through electricity, that electricity is zapping whatever this object is, and that's the reason why it's leaving these markers with these little dots, these little mounds that are right there in the middle, oftentimes a little hill or a mountain exactly in the middle, just like Atlantis was said to be this ringed country or whatever with a mountain in the middle of it, right? Just like many other legendary places. Here's more examples of these lunar craters. Now, I will show you some that are allegedly real. Okay, I'm not gonna claim any of these are real. Okay, these are examples because you've seen lunar craters many times, right? Some of these actually are not real. Some of them are definitely drawings. But anyways, here's another example of the lunar crater with a little node at the middle of it, right? Now, I could make a whole nother video on the moon and how things like this are actually created, and how the official story or the academic story of how these things created doesn't really add up compared to the electric universe model, I'll say, right? So more examples. This one right here is definitely some sort of a piece of artwork that somebody did, but see, check it out. Let me zoom in on these little craters. Even if it was artwork, this is in our minds collectively, this shape that you have, this ring, and then dots in the middle of that ring. And I will also say this follows suit with how the stars are seen in our sky. When you zoom in on the stars, right? It might have something to do with projection, and the stars being projected and the moon being a projection. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Here, some of you may have seen this image as it popped up, and you go, oh, another crater, except for that crater doesn't have a little, mountain in the middle or a dot or whatever, but it is kind of wavy, etc. I'm going to pose this theory. Think about this. What if this is not a crater? What if this is a projection of an image that is inverted, and therefore what we see as a crater, you can force your mind to flip this image upside down to make it a dome or dome shaped? That it's actually not a hole, but it's actually a dome. It's not a hole or whatever. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to give you an example. Watch, I'll show you another example, right? This one right here. You naturally, if somebody put the word crater in your mind, because the brain is easily tricked, all right? You must have come across some various YouTube videos or Facebook videos of people chanting something, but when they put the word on the screen, or they tell you what words to hear, your mind switches and you hear those words. I believe the same thing might be happening with the moon. You can look at this like a crater that has a little mini crater at the bottom of it, or you can flip this image upside down, reverse the lighting, and now I'll give you an example. It kind of resembles a nipple that's pointing downwards, right? If somebody's like nipple, I'm only using that word because it's a good example. And I'm pretty sure the second I say nipple, boom, many of you are going to see it instantaneously. And it might be hard to switch your mind back. I practiced being able to switch my mind back and forth between these two things by telling myself to flip the image upside down and to reverse the lighting. Okay, so that helps me out. Maybe you might see the dome, maybe you don't see it and you just see a crater. That's fine, but I did think that was super interesting. Here's another image of some craters. This one is artwork, I believe. and it's called Normal Lunar Crater. Look at this thing. Right? Look at, wow, right? This is definitely not, I'm telling you right now, like, I did research on this image, and it's a model that somebody made or whatever. It's very beautiful and it's very artistic, and I love the creativity that comes along with it. But it's called Normal Lunar Crater because this is what people thought of when they thought of craters on the moon, with these little mountains right in the middle of them. Now, based on what I've been talking about, wink, wink, right? About hidden lands, legendary lands, the land at the North Pole. Can you see a correlation? like my mind is kind of blown, right? This is one of the after effects of electrical discharge. This is what it looks like. The reason for that is because it has to do with the shape of the actual crater itself, right? In the middle of that, it's going to create a little barrier because it's basically like you're putting a donut on the object of energy. It's a donut of energy. It's actually called the torus field, okay? But it's like you're putting a donut of energy, because if that was some sort of impact, I know that this particular picture is fake, but it represents many real pictures, allegedly. If that was some sort of an impact or whatever, it should be crater shaped. It should be bowl shaped. You know what I mean? There should definitely not be a mountain right in the middle of all of these various craters, right? But you'll see this followed suit with Hyperborea and the lands at the North Pole, or the land beyond the Arctic Circle. All right, cool. Let's continue our journey here. It's kind of small print. Sorry about that. I don't know if I could fix that. I could fix that. Check this out. All right, so it goes on to say that this witness described the scene. Oh, I already read that one. So that's about the epicenter. All right, we continue on and we read, neither did the digging of trenches along side holes yield any meteoric findings despite prodigious efforts. What that means in English, in modern English, is they looked for meteors. They looked for space rocks. There was zero. There was none to be found. No space rocks anywhere. You know what I mean? And they tried. They tried to find some. All right, it goes on to say that there were no upturned strata or raised rims for a semi-buried crater wall, right? As you would expect with an impact crater, how it kind of pulls up the sides like that, right? Which electrical scarring does the exact same thing. It actually can lift up the dirt and the sand and the debris, which we're going to talk about after these notes right here. It says there was no upturned strata or raised rims for a semi-buried crater wall. A giant meteor had not struck or formed the expected crater-like pits and folds of peat. And then it goes on to say that for 30 days, for days after the 30th of June, 1908, the night skies in Russia and Europe held a strange glow of permanent, bright twilight. As recorded in the European newspapers, eyewitnesses to the object itself related the sky splitting in two. That one's got to sink in for me. The sky splitting in two, and an object from space, possibly larger and brighter than the sun, it blazed a luminous trail as the fire came by. So many people described what they saw as the sky opening up, which is really interesting. This one goes on to say, located 600 miles southeast of the site, the meteorological station at Irkutsk recorded a magnetic storm that lasted 5 hours. This crucial fact was not reported or appreciated at the time, yet possibly it is of major significance to determining the final explanation. Barographs in Russia and the West also showed rapid pressure changes indicating atmospheric shock waves that astoundingly had encircled the Earth twice. Note the magnetic anomalies reported in its wake. A Stockholm newspaper reported a strange illumination in the night sky, as did a Dublin-based publication over the next few days. So what happened after the Tunguska event and this fireball blew up and snapped all the trees and stuff and people were checking it out? It had an impact on our skies in most of the world that caused extremely bright night times. And it goes on to say that there were some powerful thunder and lightning storms over London on the 4th of July. Remember that date? 3 meteorological stations. So this is all happening around the summer solstice time, basically, right? In the middle of summer. 3 meteorological stations in London and 3 others elsewhere in England were found to have recorded the passing pressure waves of this event. One house beheld a strange magnetic blue glow following a thunderbolt. So one eyewitness saw what is described as a strange magnetic blue glow following a thunderbolt. This all ties in. There should be a lot of plasma apocalypse imagery and symbolism that should be popping up in your heads if you watch my channel often. All right, cool. So continuing on, it says at an epicenter approximately 5 miles across were the dead but upright trees that came to be known as the Telegraph Forest or Telegrafniki. They bore a strange appearance at the very center where the explosion had actually taken place. They call that the zone of indifference. The reason I believe that those trees were left alone is because this explosion happened in the sky and created this torus field, or this donut shape, basically. It splits in the middle. It parts in every direction, right? It goes outward, blows out, and then it circles back up. That's why in the very middle, you have the eye of the storm, or the calm, which, not that it was completely untouched, but it fared much better than the other 800 square miles or whatever it is. The region lies 400 miles south of the Arctic Circle and is even less populated heading northward. Maps of this region show one of the loneliest and coldest expanses on all Earth besides Antarctica. That clutch of photos of the ravaged forest tells a remarkable story. The scorched and blackened trees are peculiar to behold, and vast numbers of conifers and evergreens lie radiating outwards like the spokes in a wheel. So this happened in an area that has a lot of bogs, marshes, swampy kind of land, lakes all over the place, ponds all over the place, lots of dense forest and permafrost. Not to mention the world's largest reserve of fresh water, which we're going to come back to. So here's an example. Just some old pictures of what it looked like. This is the area. It's just really interesting to me. There's not, for such an amazingly large event, there's not a lot of pictures, really. There's like a handful. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. It's out in the middle of nowhere. At least allegedly it is. That also blows my mind that Siberia is even just like that's a huge chunk. That's more than the rest of, modern Russia or whatever. Plus, it looks beautiful. It looks like an amazing place to live for me personally. I think it's beautiful looking. I don't care if it's colder or whatever. It's untapped land. Why is that there? Why is that untapped? Why are the locusts of humanity not gobbling it up like they have everything else? Interesting. Now here's another example of what areas in that this is most likely. I've tried looking for the Tunguska area. It's not easy to find. There is not one video on YouTube that I could find of all those ridiculous Google Earth videos that suck up, 3 minutes of your time while you just watch somebody constantly zoom or whatever, right? I couldn't find it. I couldn't find Tunguska. It's not easy to find. It's not clearly marked out. And you think that it would be such a significant event, wiped out over 800 square miles like that. How come that's not taught about more? How come that's not looked into more? Why is that entire area blurred out? When you can only get so close in Google Maps before it's just blurred out. But there's a lot of them. I'm going to show you some more images of areas in the Tunguska area and the Siberian Tiagas that look like this. There's all these circular, just flat fields out of nowhere. There are some areas where they're more like they have angles and stuff, so they may have been wooded areas that were cut down by some locals or something. But there's many areas that are like this that don't appear to be. I'll show you some more pictures here in a second. Let's read on. It says that the peasants saw in the northwest, quite high above the horizon, some sort of body that was glowing with an extraordinarily intense light, such as that you couldn't even look at it, moving downwards from above over the course of 10 minutes. So whatever this was comparatively speaking going slow. I'm comparing that to the alleged comets and meteors that hit the earth or whatever. Goes on to say the body took the form of a pipe, aka a cylindrical type of a light, right? Which reminded me of this Nuremberg print of the event that happened over Nuremberg, right? This made the news and has been a critical part of our history, thankfully, in part due to this woodcut carving, or due to this image, this picture. I don't know how this picture is made, this drawing or whatever, right? Take a look at this drawing, right? All around the sun, right? You have all these various orbs. Let me zoom into this real quick. I know you've seen it a million times, but look, you've got these orbs. Some of them have cross-section indicating that they were connected to one another energetically, is my guess. All of these broken columns just floating around all over the place. These would be your cigar shapes, right? Your cylinders and stuff like that. And then what else? Various objects and lights in the sky. Oh, and then the crashes. These orbs whoosh, crashed down into the ground and lit things on fire and stuff, right? About Nuremberg, it says that the broadsheet claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and other odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead. The woodcut illustration depicts objects of various shapes, including crosses, with or without spheres on the arms, small spheres, 2 large crescents, a black spear, and cylindrical objects from which several small spheres emerged and darted around the sky at dawn. Everything that I'm hearing right now sounds like electromagnetic activity, right? Or paranormal activity, right? It sounds, it matches every description and experience I've ever had personally in my walk with electricity. This sounds like ball lightning. This sounds like plasma stretching out in various forms and stuff like that. And, this battle that's happening in the sky because there's invisible things that we're not aware of that are happening electromagnetically with the world. And then whenever they get strong enough, we start seeing things happening, right? All right, we read, nearing the ground, the forest, it was as if the shining body spread out. In its place, there formed an enormous puff of black smoke, and there was heard an extraordinarily powerful rumble, not thunder, as if from large stones or cannon fire, like that knocking sound, sort of a reverberating knock sound is how I would describe that, because I've heard similar things actually. At nighttime, I hear all kinds of weird sounds. Goes on to say all the structures shook. At the same time, a flame of undetermined form began to break out of the cloud. So out of the cloud, there was fire that came out. All of the inhabitants of the settlement ran into the street, and in a panicky fear, an old woman cried, and everyone thought that the end of the world had come. It goes on to say, in a nearby village, that several people observed in the northwest something like a fiery red sphere that was moving, according to the testimony of some, horizontally, but according to the testimony of others, it was at a steep incline. Near this village, the peasants saw a fiery sphere falling to the southwest of them, to the side that was opposite some other place. The phenomenon has aroused a mass of interpretations. Some say that it was an enormous meteorite. Others that it was ball lightning, or a whole series of ball lightning, which I'm going to talk about in depth. All right, so here's a map of the area, okay? You see that blue gash in the earth? That is Lake Baikal. That thing is so large, it's hard for me to describe. I wish I had something to compare it to, but this is gigantic. No wonder it holds a fifth of all of the fresh water on Earth. Now, this is super interesting. Did you know that pure fresh water that doesn't have any particulates inside of it, or, anything extra that's inside of it, that it does not conduct electricity? Not at all, right? So let's just make up a hypothetical situation. If you were able to take a jar of lightning or plasma, right? Take it all the way down underneath this freshwater lake in an area where it doesn't have any particulates in the water, right? And then let it out, it should be repelled and quickly dart up out of the lake. It wants to escape because it's being pushed on from all sides, and it's going to be squeezed up out of that lake. And if you're on that lake fishing or something at night, you will probably see a round flattened object or light come up out of the water, and next thing you know, there's UFO stories in the newspaper. Here's some more examples of some of those circular, strange, deforested area. I don't know, it's probably not a word. Around the Siberian forests. Check this out. It's really deep. And I did see one, someone else earlier on another live stream was showing like some floating island type circles or something. I actually found one of those, but I don't think I took a picture of it because I thought it was a glitch. But it turns out there's a lot of those. So here's a whole bunch of these little areas. To me, what I'm seeing is it's very similar to the surface of the moon, or the alleged surface of the moon. These, to me, look like areas where electricity has touched our surface, right? Either blowing up above it or hitting it, and it's an electromagnetic discharge event of some kind. This one has a little double area. I'll zoom into this real quick. You can see there's sort of a double, I don't want to call it a crater because they're not really leaving craters. So it's possible that this could have been a crater had it actually impacted if it was electrical discharge, which another theory I have is if it would have touched, if it was electricity, right? Of some kind, plasma or whatever, and it was a stream of electricity and it grounded itself and it zapped this particular area. Not only would it probably create some crater form, right? But it's going to do all kinds of other interesting things like suck sand up into the sky, pull dust miles up into the sky. And sometimes they make these little double crater shapes too. It goes on to say that the name for Tungus is the Russian, originally Turkic term for Evenki, the Evenki people of northern Siberia. That's super interesting to me. There was actually, these people are called Enki. That is their name. Like, they're named after the god Enki, which I've covered in detail on my channel many times, right? There was also, around the same time, around the same year, a comet whose name sounds a lot like Enki, the god, as well. So there's a couple of times Enki's actually popped up in my research here. But it goes on to say that the name of the greater region was the tribal Sibylla, as derived from the Turkic nomads, later assimilated into the Siberian Tatars, or the Tatars. This is the root for where people get Tartarian, right? Also very interesting. In the words of the party possibly closest to the event that morning, it was the Potapovich family. It says, early in the morning when everyone was asleep in the tent. So there's a family inside of a tent sleeping, right? Early in the morning when everyone was asleep in the tent, it was blown up into the air together with the occupants. When they fell back to the earth, the whole family suffered slight bruises, but Akulina and Ivan actually lost consciousness. This is a seriously huge event. When they regained consciousness, they heard a great deal of noise and saw the forest blazing around them, and much of it was devastated. Can you imagine that they were out camping in the forest or whatever, and something happened to basically suck these people up into the sky or up into the air, however high up they went, right? Could have been a super strong wind of some kind that got a hold of their tent and lifted it up or whatnot. I don't know. But either way, it's really interesting that we have so many plasma apocalypse correlations, right? Another witness at the Vanavaras village or city stated, I saw the sky in the north open and fire poured out. The fire was brighter than the sun. We were terrified. But the sky closed again, and immediately afterward, bangs like gunshots, pow, 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 were heard. Isn't that interesting that so many witnesses, I mean, even one is interesting, but two or more is like, wow, people are describing this as the sky opening up. How interesting is that? Goes on to say, in the town of Kursk, it was reported a ball of fire appeared in the sky. As it approached the ground, it took on a flattened shape. That's really interesting to me too. They're actually going to say that this flattened shape is perceived of by some scholars and modern academics as being a dome. I'll show you that too. But I'm hearing plasma. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing gases that are ionized that became ignited and formed some kind of electrical ball that turned into a flash and eventually a fireball or a ball of fire. Goes on to say, with the noise, there appeared in the air a radiance, circular in form, with nearly half the dimensions of the full moon, with a bluish hue, flying quickly in the direction of the Filomenova towards Irkutsk. After the radiance, so basically they saw a huge blue light, basically, that was radiating in the sky. After the radiance, there remained behind a trace in the form of a blue-gray streak, stretching along almost the whole way, and then gradually disappearing from its end. The radiance, without breaking up, vanished behind the mountain. I didn't notice the duration of the phenomenon, but it was very brief. The weather was completely clear and calm, which is very interesting. We've got the middle of summer, the summer solstice time. The weather is warm, beautiful day, clear, calm skies, which comes into play with some of these other stories that I've heard about spaceships, UFOs, strange lights being seen, etc. Goes on to say, based on the measurements painstakingly forged ahead every summer for 20 years, they were doing this research, a spread eagle butterfly shape emerged. It bore a wingspan of 44 miles and a body length of 34 miles. So what this means is the epicenter of the blast, right, in that matchstick sort of configuration, wasn't seen as like some sort of perfect circle or anything, but more like sort of a butterfly blob, right? And I believe that you get that butterfly shape because of the torus shape that descended from above it, right? It would naturally spread out like that and create sort of a butterfly's wings with image on the ground of whatever it touched. Here's an example, just to give you sort of a visual on that, right? This is the epicenter area right here. And right here is where all the trees are just sticking straight up. There's a little, they call it like an enchanted forest or a haunted forest or something like that. And all of the other ones just radiate out like matchsticks from there. All right, continuing on, it says that in moving from the epicenter towards the border of the leveled forest area, the more consistent becomes the radiality of the fallen trees. Further away as the blast wave weakened, the trees fell in more chaotic states. Let me translate this in English, okay? What that means is the further away from the epicenter you get, instead of the trees being all parallel with one another, right, they became more chaotic. They weren't all in one straight line facing the same direction. My theory on that is the exact same thing, that electromagnetic or ionized energy, that torus energy, whatever it was, right? Plasma. I'm actually going to get into more detail on my theory here in just a second, but that explosion, right, blasted downward in sort of a donut kind of a shape, right over the epicenter. And as it blasted to its furthest extent, it created little vortices and eddies and stuff that also knocked trees down, but to not the same extent that it did closer to the epicenter. So those trees are not following all the same direction because they were knocked down by little subsequent vortices and eddies of wind and stuff like that, right? Just like would happen in water. Throughout the research, not a single meteor fragment is ever found. Not one single one. Using the computer tomography method and applying the shape of the ground burns, there was an attempt to investigate the real shape of the light source. There was another member who here obtained a truly remarkable result. Instead of a ball or a sphere or a cylinder, the source of the light flash looked like the top of a mushroom with a convex surface at the top and a concave one at the bottom. Now, this is not the only reason they basically it's a dome. Okay. They're talking about like a dome type of a shape, right? Which you sort of would have if it was a toroidal shape, right? It would appear to be dome shaped, right? Or convex or whatever on the bottom and all that, like, just like how they're describing it right now, right? If you don't know the true shape of like this sort of donut shape in the sky, right? All right. Anyways, so that's interesting that they basically thought it was sort of like a dome of energy that descended upon this area in the Siberian forests. Here's another weird, strange area. This is actually close to the blast site. I did find it after a long time of searching on Google Earth. But some people mark these. I don't think they're marked correctly. Like right here, it says meteor of Tunguska or whatever. But if I zoom out, as you can see, it's a circle, but it's a circle of forest. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I do know that this entire area had trees that were knocked over and snapped. All of this area, right? I mean, it covers the whole area right here, basically, and probably more. So the actual area, the official epicenter, is said to be located right over here. It's still mislabeled meteorite, even though there's no evidence for a meteorite except for a fire falling from the sky and booms and stuff, right? All right, it goes on to say there were magnetic disturbances on telegraph lines around Prague, and an observer, I hate that word, an observer that was in Prague distinguished that the strange twilights were not like they were not like an aurora in appearance. So there was the nighttime sky was lit up enough for people to read at night outside for weeks, basically. Much further than the impact area as well, which we're going to talk about. So many people noted that although the sky was lit up, it was not the aurora borealis. That's basically what many people were like, hey, it was not like an aurora. This was not the aurora borealis. We know what the northern lights look like, like we're pretty close. No, this was not an aurora borealis. Letters to the newspaper commented on the brightness of the nights and noted that one could read large print at midnight, or could have continued late with a round of golf. Photography was possible far later in the evening by a strange extended length of daylight that looks eerie to this day. Evening trains were able to run without their lights on. This is interesting to me as well, and because I actually feel like the sky has been getting brighter at nighttime, and I'm able to take pictures with my camera phone or whatever of stars and constellations when before it was too dark. I never could. All right, it goes on to say there were dimmed sunsets that were seen as far away as California 2 weeks later. We also deduced that the air heated by the explosion produced enough water in the atmosphere to engender Noctilucent clouds over vast areas of the sky. Noctilucent is Latin. It's 2 words that means nighttime and light. So night lights, basically. These clouds were like night lights. I've got some pictures I'll show you. So it produces these night light clouds, or luminous clouds, basically, all over the sky. These clouds are typically 47 to 53 miles in altitude in the summertime, occurring between the latitudes of 50 and 70 degrees north or south of the equator. They are the very highest mesospheric clouds, normally too high to be seen. Also, this is a strange new kind of cloud. When I was a kid, there was like 3 classes of clouds, maybe like 5 different cloud types max. Now there's like 100 different kinds of clouds, including glow-in-the-dark clouds. Like, so weird. Things have changed a lot since I was in elementary school. It goes on to say that there are the very highest mesospheric clouds. Normally, these are too high to be seen. They are visible only when illuminated by sunlight from below the horizon, while the lower layers of the atmosphere have entered the Earth's shadow, allegedly, right? Their source is water collecting on dust particles. So let me explain that once more in English, right? Basically, if dust particles get high up enough into our atmosphere, or any particulates, really, it doesn't have to be dust. It can be water crystals, right? And way up there in that particular region is the coldest areas in our sky, right? And that's a whole different topic, but that region I feel like is definitely has impacted and come down and left its abode before, freezing the mammoths in place and causing the permafrost and stuff like that too. But anyways, glow-in-the-dark clouds caused by particulates in the air. I have a theory about that, which we're coming up on. Recent studies suggest that increased atmospheric methane emissions produce additional water vapor once the methane molecules reach the mesosphere, which is that area that has those glow-in-the-dark clouds, I believe, creating or reinforcing existing Noctilucent clouds, right? So this is actually in Wikipedia. It's an article about Noctilucent clouds. And what they're saying is that atmospheric methane emissions produce additional water vapor once the methane molecules reach the mesosphere. So if methane gas gets up into that area, it freezes and turns into little ice crystals and stuff, which causes these types of glow-in-the-dark clouds. Methane, I feel, is a part of all of this. Here's an example of a Noctilucent cloud. Are you guys having a good time in the chat? I hope so. Try to stay on point in the chat if you don't mind. Appreciate it. All right, cool. So here's an example of Noctilucent clouds. You may have seen some of these before, especially if you've watched SpaceX or whatever and they're launching their rockets way high up into the sky. You'll notice that the cloud basically glows in the dark, right? And they're saying that that's because that's so high up, it's still getting sunlight, that the sunlight is still up there, high up there in the sky. At high pressures, such as are found on the bottom of the ocean, methane forms a solid clathrate. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm going to go with clathrate. At high pressures, such as are found on the bottom of the ocean, methane forms a solid clathrate with water, known as methane hydrate. An unknown but possibly very large quantity of methane is trapped in this form in ocean sediments. Don't worry, I'm going to explain all of this like this. I can't stand this technical verbiage. I wish they would just all speak in layman's terms. In addition, deep freshwater lakes may host gas hydrates as well. For example, the freshwater lake Baikal in Siberia. Let me explain what this is saying. Hold on, do I have another one here? Okay, I'm going to explain this in my own words, and then we're going to move forward, and we're going to keep on going. But basically, methane can freeze and turn into ice, right? At high pressures. So the methane that is inside of the earth that comes up, if it's pressurized by all this huge amounts of water that are on top of it, it crystallizes and it turns into ice. And that ice, if it melts, can release once more that methane gas into the water or into the sky or wherever, right? Also keep in mind how much methane is released or has the potential to be released in the permafrost itself, right? All right, continuing on. It says, similar to ice in appearance, gas hydrates, which is basically a fancy way of saying frozen methane or other gases, are stable at high pressures and temperatures above freezing. Methane is the most common naturally occurring hydrate guest species. So methane gas does this often. Here is an example for you of methane gas being released from a frozen lake, right? They poke a hole in the ice on the lake, they literally light it on fire, and this huge spit of fire, this huge blast of fire, this tongue of fire will jump up from inside of the lake. Fire comes from the water. Fire comes from the ice itself. Nothing is on fire here. It's just the gases itself being released and then being excited, right? Here's another example of ice on fire. Here's another example of ice on fire. This is not regular snow or anything like that, just so you know. But this is what we were talking about, which is frozen gas, right? The various gases. This one's methane. All of these examples are methane, basically. But it can freeze, and it looks just like regular snow, regular ice, regular hail. In the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 7, it says, the first angel sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood. And they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Interesting correlation. Going way back further in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, this happened again. It says that Moses stretched out his staff towards the sky, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down to the earth. Fire mixed with hail. Hail that is on fire. What could it possibly be made out of? I feel like we're getting closer putting these pieces of the puzzle together. And now, we see, this is what we do on my channel. We figure out the secrets to the fire swamp, okay? Because you're going to probably, if you survive this reset, or even maybe beforehand getting up into it, you're probably going to see stuff like this happen. More and more and more, as all that methane is starting to be released from the permafrost and from the earth and from the ice and from the lakes and from the waters itself. It's all being released into the air. And here's what you have. You've got spouts of fire that just erupt from the ground, set off by electrical discharge. It says here that when methane burns in the air, it has a blue flame. Now remember, some of those eyewitness accounts, they said they saw a big bright blue light or a blue flame or a blue ball, etc., right? At first it seemed to be red, and then for some reason it changed colors. This indicates to me different things happening with the gases in the atmosphere. It says in sufficient amounts of oxygen, methane burns to give off carbon dioxide and water. Imagine that. So if you have a methane explosion or plasma or, methane that's excited electrically, right? Then it can actually explode and turn into water, which is also super interesting. When it undergoes combustion, it produces a great amount of heat, which would account for the flash burns that are on so many of these trees. Many of these trees that were not caught up in actual forest fires that were set because of the initial blaze or whatever, right? But the ones that were just subject to the initial flash, they were just singed quickly by an intense heat that seemed to blow itself out, basically. This goes on to say that the director of St. Petersburg Physical Observatory had considered 3 possibilities for the huge illuminations covering about 25% of the horizon in 1908. The aurora borealis of northern lights, to which the globe bore little resemblance, high-altitude clouds, or a massive injection of dust in the upper reaches of the air. So they're trying to figure out why the sky was lit up for weeks afterwards. You know what I mean? Like if a comet or if a meteor or whatever slams into the earth, like why would that cause the entire atmosphere to just light up and for night to become brighter for weeks on end, right? So one of this guy's theories, some people theorize, it's different theories all over the place, but one of them is there was a massive injection of dust in the upper reaches of the air. Check this out. Let's learn something interesting. Modern researchers, this is from a website where these guys right here were doing experiments on dust devils. They were measuring the amount of electricity that was seen in the air during dust devils in the desert or in desert-like areas, sandy areas, and they noticed that the electricity level increased so much that the electricity itself was helping to lift up more dust. It was actually pulling the earth up into the sky, not because of wind, but because of electricity. This article says, during the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, black blizzards of dust enveloped the Great Plains, destroying crops. When farmers heard a crackling sound over the radio, they often knew a dust storm was coming, as such storms carry an electrical field that can disrupt electronic equipment. Scientists have known since the 1800s that these fields exist, but how they might affect the swirling dust around them has not been understood. In airborne dust over the Sahara deserts, scientists have now directly measured these electrical fields for the first time and found that if the electrical field is strong enough, the field can lift vast amounts of dust into the air. What does this mean for Tunguska? This has so many implications, right? But it means that if Tunguska was an electromagnetic discharge event, that all of that electricity just above the surface of the earth could actually have pulled up dust and dirt and debris and actually just shot it in a jet straight up into the sky. Hey, Drew L just gave some memberships. Thank you, Drew L. That's awesome. I'm excited for everybody. All right, so what does this mean? This means these people who were seeing these pillars and these columns that were shooting up into the sky and stuff, right? Hey, congratulations, everybody, for joining. Thank you. Thank you for your support. All right, let's continue forward. This article goes on to say it's not just wind that raises sand and dust devils, says some physicists. Powerful electrical fields created by wind, sand, and dust also levitate more dust into the air. The discovery could have implications. Let me make this a bit bigger. There we go. The discovery could have implications for global climate modeling and even help to explain what makes Mars such a dusty world. More than 100,000 volts per meter of natural static electricity have been measured in desert dust storms and mini tornado-like dust devils or willy willies. Now, under laboratory conditions, Jasper Koch, a graduate student at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, has reproduced the electrical fields found near the ground in desert windstorms and have shown that they can also lift sand grains. And his quote is, "We were very surprised of the power of electrical fields to raise dust and sand." He and his faculty advisor, associate professor somebody are publishing their results in an upcoming edition of Geophysical Research Letters. This is what I've been saying now for quite some time on my channel, that electricity pulls dirt up into the sky, that it pulls mud up into the sky, petrifies it, and then you have a mesa, right? It pulls instantly. This is why during the plasma apocalypse, so much electricity comes into our world that dust worldwide just shoots up into the sky immediately, instantaneously, all over the place, and combines with wet water vapor that is instantly also created in our atmosphere. What do you think dust and water vapor are going to combine to make? All right. It goes on to say, one account held as many as 14 bangs taking place, and that visual reference cited a pillar of fire in the shape of a spear. That's also really interesting. We talked about the spears and the sky beams and stuff like that, right? So here you have another example of of somebody talking about these pillars of light and these sky beams and stuff like that. He says, here's what happened at 7:15 in the morning. There appeared in the northwest a fiery column with a diameter of about 4 sazen in the form of a spear. So not only did people see the sky open up, not only did people see some sort of a light that looked to be bigger than the moon and possibly bigger than the sun, etc. Not only were there huge claps of wind and dust allegedly being tossed up into the air and stuff, but they also saw these pillars that shot up into the air. When the column disappeared, there were heard 5 strong, abrupt bangs, like from a cannon. These are like percussion sounds, flowing distinctly one after another, and then there appeared in that place a dense cloud. Now, it makes sense to me that there would actually be a regular cloud that could have been formed because of such a strong change in pressure that could have depressurized that particular area that instantly just created clouds right above that area, right? The fiery column was visible to many, but the bangs were heard by an even larger number of people. So some people saw the lights, but way more people actually heard all these sounds, these explosion kind of sounds or thunderous kind of booms. A glowing head and fiery trails generally were described. No smoky tail was ever reported, but rather a bright and iridescent one by all accounts. What does that mean? That means that if this was some sort of a streaking meteorite, like the other one that you saw over Russia a few years back or whatever, people would expect to see like a trail of smoke being left behind it. But there was no trail of smoke. It was just a trail of light, which to me says ball lightning. To me, that says plasma, because I've read many different accounts, and I'm actually going to share some of those with you here in just a second, of ball lightning, where it says it was said to have like a tail that followed behind it. Another witness states, suddenly and directly to the north, over the Tunguska road, the sky split into 2. Did I already read this one? I'm going to read it anyway. The sky split into 2, and fire appeared high and wide over the forest. The witness can be placed on the exact spot in Vanavara with the object at 50 degrees elevation from his reference point that morning. He went on to say that when the sky opened up, the hot wind raced between the houses like from cannons, which left traces in the ground like pathways, and it damaged some crops. A full analysis of this witness and his family's testimonies indicate a column of fire 12 miles high and a mile wide. That's huge. The fire may have raged for mere seconds. Many trees were burned on one side only and very briefly exposed to the heat. This is a fireball exploding. This is what happens. I'm going to show you examples of how people have seen ball lightning and how it does explode, or it can explode. Here's another eyewitness. I saw looking northeast on June 30th, 1908, a large ball of fire. Oh, this is, you know what? We actually circled back around. So that was all my notes on the subject. So I'm going to take this down and we're going to shift gears real quick. I'm going to show you some pictures. One sec. I got to get him pulled up here. Oh, here we go. All right. Thanks for your patience. Boom. Oh, it's behind that picture. No wonder. Is it? No. Oh, it's invisible? Sorry, one second. Why can't I see my page here? That's weird. Huh. Okay. Let me try fixing this one more time. Sorry about that. Damn it. What a day. What a day for me. All right, that's all good. Let's I'll just redo it real quick. Boom. And I'll re-add it real quick. Screen share. Pow. All right, this should work. There we go. All right, cool. Sorry about that. Am I in front of that picture? There we go. All right, sweet. Thank you for your patience while I took care of that. Boom. Damn, fudge. God. All right. All right, cool. So let's check out some of these accounts of ball lightning. This is just an art gallery. People drew out these pictures based on stories that they had heard from eyewitnesses who had experienced firsthand ball lightning, or floating orbs of energy and light, etc. Plasma balls, basically. All right, so here's another one. You show it descending from the sky, sort of spiraling down to the ground. And it says here, the fall of a lightning ball. A body of fire from a fiery cloud exploded the powder magazine of Athlone Castle in Ireland on the 27th of October, 1697. The town was devastated, although only 7 people were killed. So, in 1697, there was a body of fire from a fiery cloud that exploded the powder magazine, or gunpowder, in a local house or whatever, that had devastating effects on an entire city, right? People drew this as like a ball of fire descending from the sky and then igniting all of that gunpowder. Here's another example, or artist's impression of something that had happened. This one says, ball lightning over St. John's Wood in London on the 26th of June, 1921. And it says an incandescent pear-shaped body hovered beneath the clouds of a slow-moving nocturnal thunderstorm. It was visible for at least 2 minutes. So there was a strange pear shape. You will see this. This is a drawing, right? That it represents a real actual thing that had happened, right? It's like an artist's rendition. You will start to see this. If you pay attention and you tune into the news around the world or whatever, you're going to start to hear about this. I'm sure that you're going to see more of these types of electromagnetic phenomenon happening the world across, especially in areas of like ley lines and areas of like high electromagnetic charge and stuff like that. You're going to start seeing this all over the place. There's just going to be plasma in the sky. Many people will interpret it through the lens of their own perception, their own experience. Remember how I said what you see is what they tell you, right? When those crowds are chanting and you hear them saying like, I love mac and cheese or whatever. I don't know what it is, right? But if they tell you they actually say this, then that's what you'll hear, right? Same thing applies to the things that you're seeing. A lot of people are told, oh, this is probably UFOs. You know what I mean? But it's not UFOs. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no such thing as alien spacecraft physically, but I'm saying that it's more likely that way more abundantly is electromagnetic phenomenon that is mistaken as physical crafts. Here's another artist rendition of ball lightning that actually just popped on into somebody's house. and there was electricity all over the place surrounding it. It says here, a ball lightning visitor in France in 1897. And it says an explosion in a chimney before the fireball appeared drove bricks into the wall of the couple's bedroom. See how they drew some bricks down there? Ball lightning can explode. Like, be careful, right? I've read so many stories, and I'm going to share another story with you about people that are enamored with the light. They're like, oh, it's so beautiful. And they walk towards it and they go try to, see how close they can get, or I don't know, take pictures and stuff. Jesus, man, be careful. Like, this stuff can kill you. You know what I mean? These are fairies. These are pixies. They will bite. You know what I mean? All right, here's another example. This one was seen out in the night sky by an entire city. It says here, the pursuit of a lightning ball in Milan in June 1841. And it says that a reddish yellow fireball chased by a group of men and boys drifted down a street during a thunderstorm. So this was not super far away. This is actually just right above the buildings, flying down the street, which is another thing that I believe many people can expect to see, especially in the post-apocalyptic world, when our world is being filled with electromagnetic energy and plasma. This will be a common occurrence. That's my bet. That's my bet, okay? This will not be something that people will be like, oh my God, come look at this, come look at this. It will be all the time. You'll see plasma all over the place in various forms. And be careful, because it's a good idea to learn what attracts it so that it doesn't chase you around and zap you, right? Here's another one. Check this one out. Actually, I think I showed this one before, right? But this one reminded me, this one came up when I was doing my research on the Wizard of Oz. That's where I got this one from when I was researching ball lightning, because that's what that reminded me of. The Wicked Witch or the Good Witch of the North, or whatever her name is, Glinda, right? She's ball lightning. Like, she just comes right on in ball lightning. This one right here says, the Malvern Hills Horror. During a thunderstorm of the Worcestershire Beacon, July 3rd, wow, it's right around same time of year. July 3rd, 1826, a huge ball of electric fire rolled into a stone shelter and burst through the opposite wall, like the Kool-Aid Man. 2 persons, it doesn't say that, I just added that. Sorry, I crack myself up sometimes. 2 persons were killed and others were injured. This is not a pet. This is no joke. This is not a fairy for you to catch and make a wish with your bare hands. This is something that either you're going to get lucky when you experience it, or your know-how with electricity might help you out to keep you safe. You know what I mean? These things can kill. These things can hurt and harm. However, I want to balance that out. These things have also been said to grant wishes, to impart deep, mysterious understanding to whoever captures one, stuff like that, because it's pure energy, right? All right, here's another one. You'll see ball lightning all the time out at the ocean, right? And many different types of sounds that come from and are spurred on by electricity too. Oftentimes, there's the legends of like mermaids or banshees that are around certain areas that are usually, almost always, located by large bodies of water. This says, rare electrical phenomenon at sea, March 19th, 1887, during a violent storm in the North Atlantic Ocean. A bright and dark object were seen. How is it bright and dark? That's the dark light. That's the neon light. I've seen that so many times. God, like that's what plasma is referred to as so often, is dark light. Right? It doesn't light up a lot. It just is light in a small area, right? A bright and dark object were seen above the JPA ship, some ship. The bright body fell into the sea, raising a huge wave. Plasma is physical, so it can interact with physical objects. If it feels compelled to go in a particular direction, like we saw, just like the Kool-Aid Man, boom, it could burst through a wall or explode through a fireplace or whatever it may be. Or if it wants to come up out of the water, it can do so. If it wants to go down into the water, it can do so. All right, it says, it raised up a huge wave. The atmosphere then became intolerably hot, right? Because it's it's that electricity in the air is charging the air, which is making it hot. It's causing everything to move faster, which causes heat, basically, right? Yet solid lumps of ice fell on deck. Isn't that something? See all the little splooshes right there? That's ice falling into the ocean all around the ship. So although it was unbearably hot, ice fell from the sky with this fire, mingled with this fire. Interesting. Here's another one. Man, there's so many good examples of these. They're not easy to find, but when you do find them, it's well worth the research. So you'll notice that there's a fireplace once again, and this ball of light has come down allegedly through the fireplace. The tailor of Paris and his visitor in the summer of 1843. Let me just double check the chat. I just want to make sure we're still good. All right, it looks like we're still good. All right, cool. Where was I? Boom. Nope. We're coming up to that one next. The tailor of Paris. Let's learn about his experience. During a thunderstorm, a small shining globe entered the tailor's room via the chimney, explored the floor, then rose and left via a stovepipe after removing the paper cover that was covering it. Once back in the open air, the globe exploded, destroying the chimney. Now let's take a look at this real quick. So these balls of light, I've got a few different pictures where they're depicted as coming down chimneys. Okay. Many people have experienced ball lightning. I'm just going to call it ball lightning. It's just a ball of plasma is what it is. Basically, it's a ball of electricity, and it doesn't have to fizzle out or anything. It can be self-contained, and they can move about and appear to be sentient in nature. They are attracted oftentimes to people's homes, and all of the wiring and all of the electrically conductive things, electricity and stuff that's naturally occurring inside of people's homes. So it finds these little openings and it's attracted to it. So it goes down in there and it starts, feeling things out or whatever. Oftentimes comes down through the chimney, exactly like Santa Claus, right? Why does Santa Claus come down the chimney? Because he's not a real person. I know, sorry. That's the truth. This is a truther channel. So I love the idea. I like getting lost, and all that stuff. But Santa represents other things, not a real person, okay? Represents energetic phenomenon. And it comes down the chimney, and it can leave gifts or it can destroy things and wreck things and stuff too, right? The Grinch also can be symbolic of this type of stuff if you look into it. All right, cool. How's everybody doing in the chat? Let me just check in. Everybody doing good? Everybody being good, I hope. All right, cool. Well, there's 335 people watching. It is an honor to have all of you. I'm going to share one last thing before we go. This is the story of the killer balloons. Thought it would be appropriate given my topic and the allegedly things that are happening worldwide on the modern news that I've been catching wind of that I don't watch. Anyways, let's learn the story of the killer balloons. This is a story about a research team who all by themselves took it upon themselves to just go out to Antarctica and go exploring. I am minimizing that story, but this is their story. So actually, I'm going to read this right here. It says, according to the official version, there's always an official version, explorers on this expedition died because of the severe storms and frost. However, one survivor subsequently told about what happened to the expedition in actuality. Here is his story. And his story is called The Killer Balloons. Check this out. It was a polar day, and almost throughout our journey was a beautiful weather. The thermometer showed only minus 30 degrees Celsius, and there was no wind. Just exactly like how they described in Tunguska. Beautiful day, no wind, great conditions, right? A very rare day for Antarctica indeed. We completed the route in 3 weeks without losing a single minute to vehicle repairs. In general, everything was going almost too good. The troubles began when we made a camp in a location which, according to all of our calculations, was the South Magnetic Pole. This is their story. All of us were exhausted, so we all went to sleep early, but we could not fall asleep. Feeling a vague anxiety, I got up and I walked out of the tent. Now, keep in mind, these are polar explorers, allegedly, right? That I assume are seriously tired by the end of their day, and they're all looking forward to going to bed, right? But they can't sleep. They want to sleep, but they have this sort of anxiety within themselves, and they can't go to sleep. So this guy leaves his tent. This is what he sees. I saw some kind of glowing ball approximately 300 meters away from our all-terrain vehicle. It bounced up and down as if it was a football, only the dimensions of it were approximately 100 times larger. So 100 times larger than a football was bouncing around by their ATV. I shouted, and all ran outside. So this guy walks out of his tent, sees this plasma ball near their vehicle bouncing around, and he yells, and it gets everybody's attention. They're all awake anyway, so they all come out to see it. The ball stopped bouncing and slowly rolled towards us. Attack of the killer tomatoes. Attack. That's what this is. Okay. These are modern stories that are echoes of the age of magic, when there was many of these things all over the place and people had an understanding of how to deal with them, or at least they needed to, or they would die. The ball stopped bouncing and slowly rolled towards us, changing its shape while moving and turning into something that resembled a sausage. So now, just like in the Tunguska event, we've got something that was described initially as being sort of spherical, but elongated itself. It's a shapeshifter, just as plasma is, right? Turning into a sausage. The color also changed. It became darker, and on the front of the sausage, a frightening face with no eyes began to emerge, but with a hole similar to jaws. So now it's starting to take various shapes. The snow under the sausage hissed as if it was red hot. Its jaws were moving, and I swear it seemed that the sausage was saying something. This is such interesting stuff. Can you guys see this? Hold on, I need to move this one over a bit. I do. Just a bit. All right, let's continue on with this interesting story of the killer balloons. The photographer of the expedition, Alexander Grodetsky, went ahead with his camera. Though the senior of the group shouted that he did not dare to approach the sausage, or better yet, to stay in place. So the photographer's like, whoa, let me get a picture of this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I mean, I'm speculating as to what was said. But the captain's like, no, don't go near that thing. Stay away from that thing. Super good advice from the captain. But Sasha kept on going while clicking his shutter. And this thing, it instantly changed shape again, stretched into a narrow strip and encircled around Sasha as a halo, or a torus field, you could say, similar to ones around the saints. I remember how he cried and dropped the device. In this moment, 2 shots rang out. Fired Andrei somebody, and standing on my right, our doctor, Roma Kustov. It seemed to me that they were not firing with explosive rounds, but with bombs. Such was the sound. The glowing tape swelled, and sparks splashed in all directions, and some kind of short lightnings. So this ball lightning got all swollen up and exploded, basically, after it wrapped around this dude. It says, I ran to Sasha. He was lying face down and was dead. The back of his head, hands, and as it turned out, the whole back was charred. The special polar suit was turned into rags. We tried to contact the station over the radio, but it didn't work. Something unimaginable was going on in the ether. Continuous whistle and growling. I have never seen such a wild magnetic storm. It lasted the entire 3 days we spent at the pole. There's those 3 days. The camera was melted, as if from a direct lightning strike. Snow and ice, where the tape crawled, evaporated, forming a groove 1/2 meter deep and 2 meters wide. We buried Sasha at the pole. 2 days later, Kustov and Borisov died. Then Andrei Skobelev. Everything happened again. We were working outside. The atmosphere was depressing. That's another thing that I've noticed with this strange, the actual pressure anomalies and electromagnetic anomalies. The vibe can change to a certain frequency that actually induces depression and anxiety in people. And this is another sign, if for those of you who ask me about the signs of the apocalypse and stuff, is increasing depression. It's the I got bags under my eyes. I'm like, man, I'm depressed. Look at that. It's happening. But yeah, it is said that there are these waves of depression that sort of wash over people right before these strange events start to happen. It says, at first, one fireball appeared. This is a totally different day, totally different story. Right on Sasha's hill. And a minute later, 2 more fireballs. This time we saw everything. The balls appeared as if densified out of thin air at an altitude of about 100 meters, descending slowly and hung above the ground and began to move by some complex trajectories approaching us. Exactly word for word how he's describing this. I also have had my own energetic sphere experience. I don't know what to call it. But mine was more translucent. It was more like looking at a bubble that was about 3 feet by 3 feet. And it was probably like, I don't know, 50 or 60 feet away or something like that. It was exactly how he's describing this. So we've got Andre was recording and I measured electromagnetic and spectral characteristics. The equipment was installed in advance approximately 100 meters from the vehicle. Kustov and Borisov stood nearby with their carbines at the ready. Like they're going to shoot plasma, right, with bullets. They began to shoot, and as soon as they thought that the balls began to stretch, they began to shoot, and as soon as they thought that the balls began to stretch, turning into a sausage. So the second they saw the sausage come out, they started shooting at it, basically. When we recovered from the shock, the balls were gone, and there was a smell of ozone in the air. Check this out. This is also something I've come across many times. This smell of ozone that is left over. They call it ozone, right? In the movie Troll that we broke down in my Truth in Movies segment, they call it hypernature. Same difference to me, right? It leaves a refreshing kind of like supernatural kind of smell. Supernature, hypernature. Though after there was a smell of ozone in the air, as if the same type after a severe thunderstorm. So that same kind of fresh air that you smell after a severe thunderstorm, that's the kind of smell that they were smelling. Hypernature. Kustov with Borisov were lying in the snow. We immediately rushed to them, thinking we can still do something to help them. Then we turned our attention to Skobelev. He stood, pressing his palms to his eyes. The camera laid on the ice 5 meters away. He was alive, but did not remember anything and did not see anything. This guy's got amnesia. Like, this is so many elements of things happening that I talk about on my channel all the time. I'm like so giddy to read these stories. He, it is now frightening to remember, was like an infant. He went, "I'm sorry," under himself. He did not want to chew. Just drank, spilling the liquid around. Perhaps he shouldn't have fed from the nipple, but you understand, we did not have anything lying around. The entire time, Skobelev whimpered and drooled. He died on the way back. So this ball lightning that this guy experienced with the camera, once again, not a good idea, right? It zapped him and basically made him retarded. You know what I mean? It zonked him out. He was gone and he died. After returning home, we decided to tell the truth, that what happened weighed down on all of us. To my surprise, we were believed. Although there was no conclusive evidence, although no new expedition was sent to the pole, the research program did not allow for it, and it also lacked the necessary equipment. As I understood it, the same thing as to us happened in 1962 to the Americans, which is another story. This story of the polar explorer Yuri Koshinov was published in an American newspaper. And that is the story of the killer balloons in Antarctica. killer plasma balls, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and whatnot. Let me just jump in the chat. Let me see who that was. Oh, Piercing the Veil. Hey, $7. Super appreciate that. Thank you. Hey, I hope that all of you have found my presentation to be interesting or helpful to you on your truth-seeking journey. I had a great time. I fully enjoyed doing all of the research for this. I had planned on doing this live stream a little bit earlier in the day so we could get more people watching it. But, you know, things happened and we roll with the punches, right? So I'm glad we were able to do this. I hope that if you found this to be of value, that you share it out, because I couldn't really do it at a time when everyone would be watching and it would get a bunch of views or something. So if you would like to share my video, that'd be awesome. Go for it. Let people know, you know, JayDreamer's got a new video about ball lightning and Tunguska and stuff. I feel like this presentation has a lot that, you know, potentially could help people out on their path and maybe connect a few loose ends. I had a blast hanging out with all of you. I hope you had a blast hanging out with me and one another. And until next time, I'm JayDreamer saying good vibes and goodbye.
So hard to fade away. I tried so hard to fade away, but something's forcing me to stay. It'd be
Only you in this vast multiverse.
Your powers collide.